In this video, we'll take a look at the menus and toolbars at the top of the IDE window. Now, as you work inside the IDE, the menus and toolbars are context sensitive, and basically what that means is that some menus will appear and disappear based on the context, and some toolbar icons will become active or inactive based on the context as well. So for example, here on the toolbar, there are undo and redo options, but because I haven't performed any steps right now inside of this form, such as adding a button to the user interface, there's nothing to undo, and therefore the undo option is currently grayed out. And similarly, after I undo something, the redo option would become enabled, and because I have nothing that I've undone, I cannot redo a step at the moment. So similarly, we have the format menu, for example, right now displayed on the toolbar, and that format menu is context sensitive to when you are designing a graphical user interface. So because of the fact that we have a form shown here in design view, I have a format menu, whereas if I close this window, then the format menu goes away. And of course, if I bring back form1.cs in design view, as you see here, we now have a format menu once again. Now, as you might expect, there's lots of different menus here with lots of different commands within them. So just briefly overviewing each of the different menus, we have the File menu, which gives us access to things like opening and closing projects, adding and saving projects, as well as things like printing files that are currently displayed inside of the text editor, etc. We have the edit menu for your traditional cut, copy, paste commands, and also finding and replacing strings within your text. We have the view menu, which gives you access to all of the different sub-windows that you can display within the Visual Studio IDE. And you'll notice for many of those that there are shortcut keys as well that you can use to bring up those windows. We have the project menu for managing the current project and files within the project. We have the build menu, which we demonstrated back in the prior lesson. We use that to compile the code inside of our projects or a subset of the code. And again, I'll mention the clean solution option here, which I talked about back in the prior lesson. Sometimes it's helpful to completely clean your solution of all auto-generated code and all compiled code and then rebuild everything from scratch. And I've found over the years that once in a while that will help resolve strange things that are occurring inside of the IDE. The debug menu is used when you're testing and debugging the apps that you're writing. The team menu has to do with Microsoft's Team Foundation server. If you're working on a team of developers on a larger project, you may need to work with the team menu. As I mentioned, the format menu is context sensitive and only appears because we have a form shown in design view at the moment. We also have the Tools menu, and this is also somewhat context sensitive and also dependent on the various options you've installed for Visual Studio. So for example, I mentioned earlier that I installed a set of tools called Xamarin, which is for cross-platform C# app development. And because I have Xamarin installed, I also have options for Android and iOS here, in addition to being able to configure my Xamarin account. There's a test menu, which you can use when testing your apps, and if you have so-called unit tests, you would manage them through the test menu. There's an analyze menu that enables you to locate violations of the .NET Framework design guidelines, so you can run, for example, a code analysis on your source code, and it will tell you about things that you could do better or differently. There's also the window menu for just managing the windows on the screen. And finally, the help menu, which is where you can get to all of the online help associated with Visual Studio. Now, as far as the toolbars are concerned, there are a couple of toolbars that are displayed by default here. Each toolbar has this little icon at the far left side here, which allows you to move the toolbar. So, for example, if I grab this one and drag down, I can put the toolbars vertically oriented rather than horizontally oriented as I drag it back here. You'll also notice for each toolbar this little down arrow, which allows you to go to an add or remove buttons menu, where you can then remove buttons that are already checked or add the ones that are not checked. And if you have certain commands that you use more frequently, you might want to put them onto the corresponding toolbar. And if there are commands you never use, you may want to take them off the corresponding toolbar to save some space. In addition, if you right-click in the empty area to the right of the toolbars here, you can select from a large variety of toolbars that you can display inside the IDE at any given time. And on your system, some of the options that you're seeing on my system here may not appear, depending once again on which version of Visual Studio you're using and whether or not you've installed tools such as Xamarin for cross-platform app development.